Was Zera an illusion? Or perhaps was she something else? Let's say a fairy? That's the question for today's video. This shouldn't surprise anybody, but there will be spoilers ahead. During the events of Fairy Tail Zera, we are introduced to Mavis Vermilion's backstory. Here's a summary. Mavis lived in a mysterious island called Tenro, where she met Yuri, Warrod, and Precto, setting the events that led to the creation of the Fairy Tail Guild, of which she would become the first master. However, Mavis's early life was full of grief and tragedy. At an early age, she lost her parents and ended up working at the Wizard Guild, the Red Lizard. She was not treated kindly by the guild members, especially the master. But no matter how badly she was treated, she never cried, and that is because Mavis believed that if you cry, you would not be able to meet a fairy. One day, the master ordered Mavis to go to his daughter's school and drop off her lunch. Zera, like everyone else in the guild, was very mean to Mavis, and she humiliates her in front of her classmates out of jealousy. On the way back, Mavis fell asleep and managed to escape the initial assault of Blue Skull and other Wizard Guild on Red Lizard. When she woke up, she made her way to the guild and witnessed the slaughter of most of the guild members. She found Zera pinned down under some debris, and with some effort, she managed to free her. They escaped together into the woods, and as they escaped, Zera asked Mavis why she would go so far to save her after all she's done. Mavis, being the kind-hearted girl she is, told Zera she just wanted them to live. Touched by Mavis' kindness, Zera wondered out loud if maybe they could be friends. However, she collapsed due to her injuries. Reality hits Mavis like a ton of bricks, as her friend lies dying in front of her. As she breaks down crying, we jump forward 7 years in the story. Skepticism hit me as soon as I saw Zera, after the time skip following the downfall of Red Lizard. The options weren't many. Did she survive, or was Mavis seeing ghosts? The anime reveals later in the story that Zera died that night of the attack. But it seems like Mavis's magic power manifested that night and created an illusion of Zera that stuck around all these years. Going forward, I will be mentioning events in no particular order, but it will help solidify the points I want to make. Please bear with me. Anyways, there is a few issues with the explanation we got to justify Zera's existence, and it ties up with why I think the Zera we meet after the time skip is a fairy and not an illusion. For instance, when Mavis asks Zera to introduce herself to Yuri, you can see his confusion as he thinks she's talking to herself. We don't know if Mavis told Yuri about her life, but judging by the fact that he came looking for treasure, there's a chance that he somewhat knew what happened to the guild prior to arriving at the island and couldn't bring himself to say anything when he saw Mavis talking to herself. It shouldn't have been too hard for him to realize that Mavis went through a lot and chose to stay quiet. But then we got this scene. Not only did Zera push Mavis' suitcase, but you can also hear her making contact with it. This is only noticeable in the anime, as you can see in this panel from the manga, Zera never touches the suitcase. The anime does this a few other times. For example, when they leave the island, you can see Mavis touching Zera's hand in the ship. During the fight with Dragon Yuri, Mavis casts an incomplete fairy law spell and ends up on the ground unconscious, and when Zera finds her, she brushes off the hair from her face. On episode 270 of the anime, in chapter 5 of Fairy Tail Zera, Zera hugs Mavis in the river, and that's not all. It seems like Zera also has contact with her surroundings. On the same episode and chapter, she decides to go catch a fish on her own and ends up falling into the water. When Mavis goes to check on her, the ground around her is wet. Later, when she goes for a swim, she's seen making ripples and splashing water. With all that being said, on episode 271, the group runs into a few of Blue Skull wizards and Mavis scares them away using her illusion magic. The big bird Mavis summoned seems to be emitting gusts of wind when he flaps his wings, evident by the leaves flying around, although the trees don't seem to move at all, and the leaves could be part of the illusion to make it more real. Joffrey, Blue Skull Master, couldn't tell the flames were fake during their final confrontation in Magnolia either, which leads me to believe that the flames are emitting heat, or that he simply was in shock and that's how he got fooled. There's also the chance that Hiro Mashima wasn't thinking that hard on these when he added the scene, or that the animation team took more than a few liberties while creating the anime. Either way, this instance almost defeats the theory completely, due to the realism of Mavis' illusions, and this would have been it if it wasn't for Seraph. As soon as Mavis meets Seraph, and he destroys her childhood with his God-given nakedness, she figures out his curse and is saddened by how lonely this man's life is.
Mavis decides to create a bunch of animal illusions to ease the pain he must be feeling. And we're talking about Seraph here. One, if not the most powerful and knowledgeable wizard ever, and he couldn't tell the animals were illusions at first. This does give a point to Mavis for how realistic her illusions are, but also explains how she fooled Joffrey. And while we're on the subject of Seraph and Joffrey, it's also worth mentioning that they can also perceive Zera, probably, in a manner of speaking. In episode 272, Seraph decides to teach Mavis group magic per her request, and when he arrives at their campsite, he glances at all of them individually, and yes, that includes Zera, which prompts her to hide even further behind the tree. When Mavis captures Joffrey, he says,
"What can just the two of you do?"
And at the time, only Zera and Mavis were present. This is on the sub-anime though. Truth be told, this is actually one of the weakest pieces of evidence we have. It is possible that the previous statement is a mistranslation and that Joffrey is referring to Precht and Yuri, who are taking on the whole Blue Skull Guild at the time by themselves, as it's implied that Mavis explained her plan off-screen to him. On the sub, he says,
"Absolutely ridiculous. Blue Skull will not be defeated by just two people."
And even if this is another mistranslation, he might be referring to Warrod and Mavis, who are the ones who took part in his capture. On the manga, that part of the dialogue is completely missing. Now moving on, after the fight for Magnolia against Blue Skull, Yuri decides that it's time to tell Mavis about Zera, as he believes she needs to move on. And listen guys, this one hurt me, almost as hard as the ending of Russ's chapter in Kingdom Hearts 2. If you know, you know. The problem is, when Yuri tells Mavis the truth and she comes to terms with it, Zera begins to fade away. But she becomes visible to Yuri at the last second and tells him that she's counting on him to watch over Mavis. All this while Mavis is clearly holding on to her. But that's not all. She even flies over to Precht and Warrod and thanked them as well.
いかん。雨が降ってきたな。
はい、大佐. And again, this solidifies the fact that Zera is her own person with her own feelings. And this does present an issue for the whole illusion created subconsciously thing. She shows way too much insight and initiative. And though we could speculate that this is because she's a different side of Mavis, her most suspicious and less gleeful side that is, I believe it's more than that. She makes her own decisions constantly. In the ship scene, she doesn't follow Mavis when she goes off to explore. She stayed back and let Mavis and Precht go on their own as they search for information about Blue Skull. She's shown to be sad, happy, scared, even when no one is watching her. Zera usually stays in the background and avoids contact with things. And this could be because she is an illusion and can't interact with anything, although we have seen her do it. Or because she's actively avoiding being detected by anyone other than Mavis. Zera even detects Yuri before Mavis in the island, and during the final fairy tale arc, she reappears as soon as Mavis is released from the crystal by Kana, and proceeds to tell Gajeel and the others about Irene's Universe 1 spell. The question is, how did she know about the spell since Mavis didn't know herself before waking up? A fair explanation for this is that she's Mavis' subconsciousness, and it is projected in the same way Mavis has been doing it till this point, but not on purpose. Well, I believe Zera is actually a fairy, and here's why. During the first confrontation with Blue Skull, Mavis cast an illusion to scare the wizards off. However, Joffrey figured it out and dispelled it. The magic he used to dispel the illusion covered a big area, but failed to erase Zera, who was nearby. In the river, a fairy is seen flying past Mavis and Zera. If the fairy is real, my assumption is that she was talking to Zera, perhaps telling her that it is almost time for her and Mavis to part ways, hence why Zera was so sad when Mavis found her. Not only that, I could be wrong about this, but I'm almost sure that every time we see a fairy, Zera is in the same scene or at least close by. We also don't see a lot of fairies in the series. As a matter of fact, I think the ones we see are during the Fairy Tail Zero adaptation and at the end of the anime and manga, but when they do appear, they fly around leaving some sort of pixie dust trail. The same trail that Zera left behind when she flew to Precht and Warrod before disappearing. So let's say that Zera is an illusion. When Mavis finally found out, Zera acted like she knew the whole time. If that's the case, then was she acting when she was holding on to Yuri Dragonforn during the Magnolia events? Or when she tried to talk to Precht on episode 274, also chapter 10? Mavis wasn't around at the time, so there was no need for this extra behavior at all. Zera even questioned Mavis as to why she would go so far for Yuri, and says, "Do you still believe in fairies?" And when Mavis said yes, she responded with, "Then I believe in you." And sure, this might be reaching on my part, but low-key, it sounded to me like she said, "Do you believe in me?" My theory is that Zera is actually a fairy who lived in Tenryou Island and decided to protect a pure-hearted girl until she found new friends. I also stumbled into different theories while doing my research, suggesting that Zera died and became a fairy, which I think is possible. This is just speculation, but maybe there are some requirements to become a fairy in the fairy tale universe, and Zera met them. Then she was given the task of watching over Mavis until she no longer needed her. In the end, it is up to your interpretation, as many theories tend to be. But there is one final clue I want to share with you. This is the ending of the anime and the manga.
See ya!
And there you have it, guys. That is all for this video. Please let me know down in the comments if I miss anything. Tell me if you subscribe to this theory while you subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to drop a like on the video. That's it, guys. Noob out. Bye.